money. And then last week we talked about the importance of really understanding your content before you even begin designing how it's going to be displayed and how it's going to be presented to the people. And that brings us to this week, which is all about content planning, right? So might as well just dig right into the presentation, right? All right. Oops, I forgot to turn my phone off again. I can't believe I did that again. All right. Okay, so this is not going to come as a surprise to you, but the best laid out plans are ones that have been measured twice before you cut. If you've ever built anything and you did not make your measurement correct and you did your cut and it was the only material that you had, you probably came into a big situation where you were ending up having to run back out to the store, get a new piece of material, all of that, right? So the same thing happens when it comes to content planning. You can spend a lot of time creating something and working towards something, and only to realize that at the end of the day, it's not actually the content that is going to actually help you in your business. So as we talked about a couple of weeks ago, we talked about how important it was to really understand where your clients are in the sales funnel process, like which stage of a customer are they. And this is kind of all comes into play when you're actually creating your content and deciding what you're even going to write about. So first things first, you're probably gonna not be surprised about this. Make sure you've done your ideal client profile. All right, you need to be crystal clear about who you're talking to and why. Now, I'm going to go show the, there we go. So I'm going to kind of go over the ideal client profile that I have created. Here, let me make this a little bit smaller so it fits better on the screen. Oops, did that work? Hold on, sorry. I don't know why that is not. I'm getting it sized right. Sorry about that. Okay. There we go. Now it's sized better. So, when you have an ideal client profile, most of the time they usually start with these basic demographics, like, the little things about who it is that you are speaking to. Now, I personally don't think the demographics are that important unless they're important for what your offer is. Like sometimes it really does make a difference about the age or the gender or your ethnicity or your location. Like if you're an in-person, photographer, your location is going to be super important for understanding your demographic. And really the demographics come into play when you're going to be creating your ads. This is a lot of the information that is available that you can target your, ad campaigns too. So they are a little bit important to start thinking about, but it come more into play when it is time to create your ads. But I do think it's a good place to start with to get you in the process of thinking about it. This is not going to be a training on your ideal client profile, but I just wanted to bring it up because this is the one that I use and have created, and it is available. If you're watching this on YouTube, there's a link in the description. If you're on Facebook, I'll put a link in the comment notes. And then also identifying, where they are, because this is going to come into play when you're thinking about how you're going to use your content, right? But really, this section of why is going to be the most important part before you start thinking about your content at all. Like you have to really understand and like crystal clear about who your client is, what their pain points are what information is going to propel them to want to purchase your offer, right? So just talking about your wonderful, amazing product is great, but there are tons of advertisements out there. Like we are so bombarded with information that just hearing about another product is not going to be enough to drive someone to want to purchase. They're going to need to know and trust you, right? And if they already know you, if they're already following you on social media, that's one thing. But chances are you're trying to write content to bring in new clients, and a lot of those clients are going to be cold, and they're not going to know anything about you, anything about your product, or anything about, the solution, and they may not even know about their problem, as we've talked about before, right? So the different stages of where your client is, do they even know what their problem is? If they don't, you're going to have to write, some good educational content that's going to inform them of what it is that they need to do in order to address the pain points. But having this client profile done, like knowing what their hopes and dreams are, knowing what their false beliefs are, knowing what kind of transformation or result they want to get, what is keeping them from their goals, what is their motivation for working with you or anybody in particular, what their common objections to purchasing, and what it's going to take for them to work for you. If you've done this work, if you've laid this out and you keep adding to it and keep coming up with new ideas, it's going to lead you to figuring out what kind of content you're going to write for, because you're going to want to write content that addresses some of these points that are on this client profile. Having a, you may know the education, or you should know, right? Like you should know what information your client needs, and probably your service or offering or product is going to address that. And, let's take a classic example of a teacher, like an elementary school teacher and a young, student. Most parents don't really know exactly what happens every day in the classroom. They don't understand what it means to do course planning and, lesson planning, and what goes into it, and what things that need to be, considered. But they do go into those parent teacher conferences, and they want to have a general idea of what benefit this student is their child, their student is having by taking this, being in the class with that particular teacher. And that's the kind of mindset that you really need to think about when you are writing out your content. It does not have to be this full, in-depth, information about, the exact details of everything. Unless you're doing a sales page, then you will want to have some more of that content laid out. But it's not even at the top. It's really once you've educated them about the purpose of why your offer is good. So if you're going to be doing weekly content, whether it's for your blog or if it's for social media, however, keeping this ideal client profile in mind is going to help you kind of create and work towards developing that content, because each of these paragraphs, if you do them well and you write them out and you have thought, you could probably come up, with 3 or 4 or 5 for each, different types of content that you can write for each of these paragraphs. So having a really good, thorough client profile is going to help direct your content. And then if you think about like what their hopes and dreams are, and you think about where they are in the different stages of the process of the sales funnel, like do they know what their problem is, or are they know what their problem is but they don't know what the solutions are? Even within these different categories, you can write, it's not the same, but it's kind of the same content, but it has a different purpose, right? And it has a different meaning for what is going to resonate with your target audience or your ideal client. So that is step number 1, is being crystal clear about who you're talking to and why. And this is why it's important to really understand who your ideal client is and what they are doing and where they are going and where they are in your process. And that leads us to targeted. So you want to make sure that your content, obviously it's, you've got the client, who you're talking to, what pain point or result or transformation or hope or dream, or, you've got that part down now, and you know why you're writing that content. You know what kind of feeling or emotion you want the person to have. Now you want to start thinking about how this content that you are going to write is going to pull them through your sales funnel, to get them into your sales funnel. And what I mean by sales funnel, I don't necessarily mean an actual funnel, right? But the concept of you're going to bring people in that do not know who you are, or maybe they know who you are and but you're writing content that appeals to them and they're like, oh, yes, I want to fix this problem that I have, or I want to change this belief that I have. I want to feel a different way about myself. That is why people purchase anything, right? They purchase because they want to have a better life, whether it is because the soap is going to make cleaning dishes easier or the mascara isn't going to run down their face, right? You can think of a million reasons why people buy a certain kind of product, and it's never really about the product. Now, the product will deliver on the promise of not having runny mascara, right? That is what the product offer is, but really the reason why they're doing it is so that way they are not embarrassed by having black raccoon eyes in the middle of the day. So taking that transformation and that purposeful, like the purpose of the content, and then weaving into it what your specific business goals and your specific sales funnel that you are. Like if you're beginning, your sales funnel may just be about your content may be all about creating awareness of what the problem is and what your solution is. But then if you've been in business for a while or you've got a lot of warm leads already, then your content is going to be about really capturing that transformation and overcoming any objections they have into getting into your program or your offer or whatever it is that you're selling, right? If you have a product, right? Whatever that is what you want to tie the content that you're writing and the purpose of it, and you want to tie it specifically to a goal. And you want it to be one specific goal because although depending on how you write your content and what the purpose of the content is, if it's truly just an educational thing, then maybe you're talking about steps that they need to do before they even get into your offer, or maybe you have a freebie that would help them kind of warm them up and nurture them so that way they will get into later on in your sales funnel. um, you know Also, you have to consider, do you even have a welcome sequence? Do you have a way that if people do take some form of action on your website, you're ready for that? Because maybe you need to direct them to a phone call with you or a consultation, or maybe you do have a newsletter already and a welcome sequence and you want to direct them to that. So you really have, it's going to be very specific to where you are in your business and where your funnel or directs people to, right? As I said, like, is it going to be to a phone call or a consultation, or is it something that you've already got on autopilot that's working really well, where that if they go over to this sales page, they're going to get all of, once you created this content, whether it's a blog post or a social media, you take them directly over to a sales page that then gets them through to that purchase. That is, your sales funnel. Or if it is getting them over to your website, so that way they will, reach out to you and schedule a consultation, so that way you can, guide them through all of their questions to get them into your offer. Ideally, you'll have a website that does a lot of the work for you, so that way people don't have to coordinate time with you, and they can actually just get into your program or your offer or purchase your product, without your needing to be, hand holding them through. And that is hopefully your end goal. If you have an online business, that's probably what you want to do, is get them to that point where they are doing a lot of the work for you. And that way it frees up your time, so that way you can spend it on creating content for your marketing plan, right? So that when you're doing your planning, you want to do that first, right? Like, you want to think about who your client is. You want to think about what your goal is. And then the next step of the planning process is really thinking about how this content is going to be used across multiple platforms. Because if you're spending a lot of time, maybe you're writing a blog post, or maybe you're doing a video, either way, you're having to plan it out, right? You're having to take time to write it out, or maybe think through what the content is going to be on the video. And then how are you going to be able to take that content and that time that you've worked on and use it across your platforms? So, this is where having a social media plan really kind of comes into play, because most people have social media, and that's usually what they're using to get their message out there to people, whether that's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Pinterest. Although Pinterest really isn't a social media platform, it's really an advertising platform. But anyways, whatever, your social or Clubhouse, right? Like there's all these different platforms. You want to start thinking about how you can then, take snippets of it. Maybe you take a clip from your video and then post it to different social media platforms, or maybe you take a quote and then you create a really pretty, graphic and put it on Instagram, or maybe you create an infographic. Thinking about how this content can be then used across your different platforms is going to be really, useful. And especially if you're using something like Facebook or YouTube, where it really is going to be an evergreen, which, by the way, evergreen just means that it is something that will last, throughout time. Like if you think about certain trees are seasonal, but evergreen trees are green throughout the year. And that's what people mean by evergreen content, right? So you want to think about how to create content that, if you have a website and you're putting your content over there, then it becomes evergreen content, and people can discover your content, a year from now. And then, if you've had that goal in mind, that end goal, that business goal, and you have that sales funnel, then by having this content that has that goal in mind, you create this once, and then you're just going to keep getting people that lead into that funnel. Now, if you're using a platform like Instagram where it's very temporary, then you're going to want to think about how to utilize that content. And, if you're reposting, say, a good post that you created with a really great caption into your story, then you want to make sure that when you create those captions, that they are still relevant, right? You don't want to be talking about necessarily Valentine's Day, although you could talk about Valentine's Day, but you're only going to be able to use that content around Valentine's Day the next year. Doesn't mean you can't use seasonal things, but the more your content is not tied into in an event or a holiday or a certain time of year, the more you can use it, repeatedly throughout the year. And if you have, especially if you have blog posts and you're new and maybe you don't have a big following, in a few months from now, when your following's bigger, you're going to want to, announce that blog post again, because those first initial people probably haven't read those blog posts. I mean, maybe they have, but maybe they haven't. And even if they have read it, I don't know about you, but sometimes I go back and I revisit YouTube videos and blog posts that I've read before, because, I have a different knowledge base. And so when I hear or read that information again, I'm coming from it from a different place. So I'm getting more from that content. So you will be doing your potential customers and clients a favor by telling them about your content over and over and over again. And so the more you create content that can live, for years, the more you're going to be able to get out of that content. So, taking that time to develop, one really good piece of content that leads into a sales funnel. Ideally, you'll have a place on your page where it's got a URL that is a sales landing page that you can update as your offer changes. So even though what you might be offering right now is not the same thing as what you're going to be offering a year from now, that URL can still live there. And then as your offer develops and grows, those people who find that blog post or that YouTube video or that content, like if it gets shared again, then they can actually end up on that same place, and your offer is still current and it makes sense for what the information that they are looking for. And if it does change a little bit, it's okay. It's still what your offer is, and chances are whatever you created is still going to guide them to an offer that you're providing that is going to address some of those same concerns. And you're probably still going to have some of the same transformations, even if your offer changes, right? So most people are looking for a transformation of being happier, healthier, and whatever that presents. And chances are your offer helps them be happier or healthier, right? So that is really the basis of how you create the content, right? I'm going to go back over here to the this. I want to show you this blog template that I use. I find it very useful to get my ideas down just like in an outline form before I start creating it, because we may know all these different steps, but making sure that we have everything really is useful. So the blog topic, this is something that I sometimes I do and sometimes I don't, but I really should do. The more I've done it, the more I realize that it's actually better to write your title of your blog post or your video or your content after you've created the content, because sometimes we have this idea of how our content is going to develop. And then as we really start planning it out and creating it, we realize, oh, I can tie it better to my business goals if I change this aspect of it. So doing your title later is actually one of my best suggestions and tips, is do your title after you've already created your content. So it's more about a blog topic. So like, for example, today I was doing content planning. Originally, when I came up with this idea to do the content planning back in January, I thought it was going to be very different than what it ended up doing, what it ended up being, because I realized once I started getting all the content together, that content planning really was more than what I was just thinking about before. I was really thinking about content planning for just a website, but I realized that, oh, wait, this can be applied across multiple platforms. So then changing your title and how your SEO and your title that you're going to use to bring people to your website is going to be a little bit different than, say, the topic that you originally had. So start with a blog topic and then a publish date if you have one, or you know what you're going to do, and then the customer stage. Knowing, are you writing this content for people who don't know anything, or is this going to be more like an advertorial where the people kind of already know what it is that you do and they have an idea of what your solution is, and so are you now going to just nail down that all of those objections to getting into your offer? So knowing the customer stage first, right? And then the purpose. What is it from that ideal client profile that you've done, what is that purpose that you are writing this content for? And then also with that, what is the purpose for your, where you are in your business, right? Is this for, a specific sales funnel? Is it going to be for a freebie? Is it going to be to get on your newsletter? What is it, right? Or is it to just subscribe to your YouTube channel? Is it, right? You can see there all these different things that, are going to be very specific to you. So what is the purpose? Just once you have that in mind and you are keeping your purpose, it'll be easier when you create your content, because you're going to want to pepper in the purpose of the information that you're giving, right? So I don't know if you've noticed here, the purpose of this particular training is about getting people to get the ideal client profile, right? So all the clients that I work with, one of the biggest things that we work on, and if they have this done ahead of time, is the ideal client profile. And if they have it done ahead of time, it makes the whole entire planning process of their website and their marketing a lot easier, because we can tweak and fine tune their client profile, and we have it's a jump start. So that way they can get farther along in their business quicker, right? And then the key points. So just writing out really briefly what key points you're going to want to address. Are you going to be addressing a pain point? Are you going to be giving them, information about the what of their problem? Are you going to be overcoming some fear? Listing out what these points are ahead of time is going to make it easier then to create your content, right? And then going back to the SEO part of it, right? So if you're on YouTube, or if this is on your website, there is, or even Pinterest, there is a big SEO aspect to it, because this is how people are going to be finding your content. Facebook does a little bit of this too. And Instagram really had a big focus on hashtags, but they're actually switching over to the keywords aspect of it. And they're going to be delivering content in front of people that is going to help them the most with their question. Because remember, anytime someone is searching, they're searching for the answer to their particular question. So what question are they asking? So in Google's terminology, they call it the ask a question box. If you've ever seen it, there when you do the search, there's like a little box that has a question, and then you press the drop down, and then it has the best answer to that question. So if you can pepper in some of those questions and use those as headings, like I showed you in the training a few weeks ago, then it's going to be easier for Google to know that your content that you're delivering is answering a specific question. So keep those in mind. And if you write your entire blog article or even your YouTube description with these questions in there, it's going to help you rank higher when people actually do those searches. Same with Pinterest too, because Pinterest is basically just a search engine as well. So then your title is going to be, want to have some of those keywords, like what questions are they asking, what keywords are they searching for. So make sure that your title includes those keywords in there. And as I've said before, your SEO title can be different than your title on your page. And then the description, this is going to be like your excerpt, like in a one sentence, one, two, three sentences. I think it's 155 characters. You're going to want to make sure that the whole purpose of the content that you're there is going to be in that first little bit. Now, if you're doing this for, say, Instagram, your social media, in particular for Instagram, that first sentence is the preview that you get. So you want to make sure that you capture the attention in that very first sentence. And then hashtags. So if you're posting on social media, you want to include your hashtags, and then you write out your content. I find it's really easy once you have those key points and then you kind of put them in you list out all the key points, and then you move them around and put them in the order that's going to make sense on how you write them. Also remember to answer the question first, and then do the main purpose of the content first, and then all of the supporting evidence goes underneath it. So your first paragraph gets to the point very quickly, very clearly, so that way you are providing useful information, because no one wants to read through a bunch of fluff to not even get the answer to their question. If you give the answer to the question right away at the beginning, then people are going to probably continue to read through to see why that is the answer to their question. So first should be the answer to the question, and then all of the key points that support your answer to the question for the content. All right. So that is the blog template. If you would like to have the blog template, leave a comment, and I will have that there for you. Let me go over here real quick and see if there are any. Oops, I don't have the right. All right. I have the wrong thing open. Sorry. I was looking for the Facebook to see if it is in there, but I don't think I opened it up. All right. So I hoping there aren't any questions. Well, I'm hoping there's questions. If there are questions, then I will go back in and whether this is YouTube or on Facebook, if you have any questions, just go in, leave them. I'll go back in and answer them. If you're watching this on the replay, type replay, and that way I know that you watched it, and I will see you guys next week. All right. Bye. Wait, how do I end this? Oh, there we go.